everybody. I'm Anna, and I'm your growth and partnership person for Mars. So if you ever feel like partnering with Mars X, please hit me up. And today with me is Mariah Barber, who's an amazing founder of the Invisible Strength. And what they're doing is an intersectional link to disability justice in the workplace, teaching our organizations how to basically work the culture that centers DEAI. that's a long one. Values into the workplace. But yeah, you will be way better in telling everybody what this is about and how we got to talking. So please, Mariah, could you walk us through your background a little bit?
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Happy Mars X is supporting us with this live. Hopefully we have some fun a little bit talking about inclusive design. Forgive my voice, guys. I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, but I am Mariah Barber, as you said, and founder and CEO, co-founder and CEO of Invisible Strengths. And we believe, like, our acronym is IS, the future of work is accessible. And so you talked about diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. So DEAI. And if you switch those letters around, it spells out idea. And so our idea is that if we connect job seekers to people posting jobs, we can actually create an algorithm that allows people to determine like culture fit. So it allows the hiring manager to see if this person would be a good fit for their culture on the job. And it allows the job seeker also to see if it'd be a good fit for them. And we do that through building an app that is centered on inclusive design. So we have really expansive gender options, expansive race options within our application, also expansive options for you to choose an accommodation on the workplace, which I'm sure we'll get into more with our discussion. But an accommodation can be everything from a physical ramp or elevator, which most people are familiar with, or like if you have an invisible disability or an invisible strength, as we said, it may be something like coaching or telework, or flexible scheduling. So we'll get into that more, but that's a little bit about what I do. We also are trying to build out a learning platform as part of our application, because we heard from our users that they wanted to be able to do trainings on like neurodiversity at work and a lot of other elements in an asynchronous style. So that's a bit about us.
That's super exciting. Thank you.
Yeah,
And just as always, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. And I'm sure Mariah will be more than open to answer any of those. And honestly, I mean, this is very interesting. And I think it doesn't get the justice it deserves, because I'm going to be completely honest here. When I started researching, like really going into the topic, when I met you, right? I thought, okay, accessible tech, that sounds kind of interesting. Like, what is it? And then I realized that, first of all, we're using so much of it every day, even me. And you probably will tell more about it, like what is available already. And the second thing, and this is something you said and kind of blew my mind. This is something so simple, is that somehow we don't see people have a disability unless they're in a wheelchair. And I thought, oh my God, that is so mind-blowing. I mean, this is so simple. How do we think about it more often? So could you maybe walk us through, like, what is accommodation? Like, what is already available? What is the tag, the accessible tag that we are already using?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love these questions. I'm going to break them down in parts because there's so much.
Sure, sorry.
No, it's okay. I think it's all interconnected, like everything that we do. But like, so the first piece is like, I'll go to accommodations. So we do an accommodations first approach with our software. And what that means is like everyone, regardless of what country you live in, there is some sort of law in the US. It's called ADA. So basically, it's a law that protects people with disabilities to be able to get fair employment. But every country has their own version of this, right? Even with the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goal, they want to have more, they put these out every 10 years. They want to have more people with disabilities into the workforce. But the problem is there is like not a set process, whichever country we're talking about how to provide the resources. Because, you know, if you're having someone you're hiring that may have a disability, whatever it is, whether it's color blindness, dyslexia, a lot of things that we can't see to the naked eye anyway, they have to out themselves to the employer. And sometimes, you know, HR or human resources, whatever it's called in your country, wants to do the right thing, but they may not have been exposed to what the different support systems are. So I learned through this process because I myself have lower vision, and I had to have a lot of eye surgeries, and you can't see right now, but I'm projecting us onto my screens in my office. And I realized the simple thing I needed was any job I have to ask them for screens so I can enlarge and zoom in. Some people have screen readers. We'll get into other accommodations for different categories. But the point is, it took me a long time to figure out I just needed screens, you know, and it's important to talk about that with the employer on the front end of the hiring process so they can see if they can afford your accommodations or provide them, right? So what we do on our platform is every employer that wants to post a job with us, they have to put at least 3 accommodations they want to provide. And how we list those accommodations is we went to the US Department of Labor. We're focused on the US market right now with the idea to expand to the global space because everyone needs the support. But basically, we looked at what the top accommodations were being utilized, and there was a list of 82. So then we went and did a lot of pile sorting and just kind of seeing what our drop-down menu should be through doing user testing with people through our inclusive design and with hiring managers to find out how they sort and what they can provide. So anyway, things on the list that may be options are like flexible scheduling, like I was mentioning, an ergonomic keyboard. Some people may have scoliosis. They may need an ergonomic chair at their desk. There's a lot of different disabilities that may come up, you know, even just bringing it back to accessible tech. You may need someone who's an interpreter doing sign language for you to be able to do your job if you are a deaf person. Or you may need closed captionings on your meeting. So like, you know, that's one piece of accessible tech that's on Zoom, even what we're using right now, where you can actually have an interpreter or you can have the words being transcribed automatically under meetings. So those are just some examples of different things that folks may ask for, because what we found is that these accommodations or solutions that we like to call them, they actually can support people with different disabilities. So for example, if you're neurodivergent, which could mean you have ADHD or you may have autism, you may be on the spectrum, you may also need flexible scheduling, you know, so that you can get to your appointments. And then someone else may have, you know, depression, and they may also need flexible scheduling. And in this way, when we focus on the accommodation, you don't need to worry about like outing yourself to an employer. Of course, you can provide that classified information to HR when needed, but you could just focus on what supports you need, and it allows you to be more effective at your job and more return on investment for the business as well, because 25% of the population that's working in the US have an invisible disability or chronic condition. So it may be diabetes, it may be cancer, you know, it can be so many different things, but it may be affecting the way that you do your job, and you just don't know what supports you can ask for. That will be a win-win for your employer and you. So that's just a little bit about the accommodations piece. I wanted to explain that because I know a lot of people aren't familiar, even who have conditions or are employers, they just don't know. There's a myth sometimes that it's more expensive to employ folks with disabilities, which sometimes can be true. But at least in the US market, which is the one we're mainly focused on right now, like 65% of accommodations in our list actually require no payment or a one-time payment from employers. So it's not as expensive as you would think, and you may actually be losing money by not providing the support you need. But moving to accessible tech, there is a lot more focus on this globally. I actually have found out about accessible tech from looking at some different conferences and things that were happening in Europe that I was attending virtually at the time because it was during COVID with a lot of lockdowns in 2020. But I was in a group called Together International, which is for disabled or differently abled founders. And a lot of them were talking about accessible tech. And I had been in the tech space doing my own research to build my app. And there just wasn't a lot of conversation around this. So I realized that in UX, UI, or user experience, I like to explain acronyms because sometimes people don't know. There is a lot more focus now on making sure that tech is WCAG certified. You could be like AAA certified, just depending on how the colors are and how the icons are, to make sure it's accessible for like screen readers or people with color blindness. And the list goes on. Because Meta and all these huge different tech companies or platforms are realizing that people are able to use this augmented reality AI. If they're, differently able, they can't move certain body parts, they may be using a VR headset, or even if they are appearing to be, able-bodied, they may have color blindness or be dyslexic. And like, how is the tech responding to them? So there's a lot of different organizations working on this. Another big one is XR Access. They are focused in the US, but I believe they also have a global market. They're a nonprofit focusing on looking at existing tech and finding out how accessible it is. So I've supported them with some of their think tank discussions, but it's been a really big conversation, whether you're talking about coding, no code tools, or you're talking about user experience. So the way that we built our platform is we intentionally have had a lot of people with different disabilities using the software throughout our build so that we can hear, hey, a lot of errors are happening here. Let's change where the button is, or let's change the onboarding screens so that they can have more a kind of bot assisting people to explain how to be able to access things. Because again, even as a person with lower vision, on my iPhone, even I know everyone mainly has an iPhone. Sorry to the Android users, but
That's
you
me.
can make it accessible on Android with making your text a little bit bigger. For my phone, when someone's calling me, it will say what their name is. It will say this person's calling me, and some people use it that don't even have a disability. They just want their phone to talk to them. Even with Siri, you can end with just different softwares that are out there. You can Alexa, that's what I was trying to think of. Alexa, a lot of people with lower vision or that may have trouble with remembering dates and times, they can use Alexa to set schedule for them. So there's a lot of ways that existing technology has accessible tech, but we definitely have a long way to go. And I do think it's important to have folks with disability in tech working. So a big thing that we also do on our team is we like to hire people that are underrepresented, partner with different schools for UX design, like General Assembly, and She Designs, which is a school focused on more women being in user experience design. And so, yeah, we like to have different apprentices and just contractors that we use that are either women in tech, non-binary people in tech, queer people in tech, or sometimes all of the things if they're like me. And maybe they have disability too, but it just makes you a better designer because you have a really intentional way that you're building things for people like you in your community. And you're thinking about other facets of society, right? That maybe you're not a part of, but you just have more consideration. So yeah, those are just some things that we're doing. I hope I answered all the questions. We can circle back.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. And actually, when you said that a lot of companies don't see the advantages of hiring people with disabilities and people, having diverse teams, and that actually can make them money, right? Not make them lose money, right? And I heard this when I was researching. I heard this case of Domino's, and I think you should probably know it, or maybe have heard of it. So
No, I don't know this
apparently,
one. I'm excited to learn.
okay, so apparently, some time ago, there was a lawsuit against Domino's because one of their customers was not able to basically just order pizza, right? Because they were visually impaired, and the Domino's didn't have um, an integration with iPhone screen reader, right? So basically making it impossible for visually impaired or people who have lower vision to order a pizza. And this is like such a simple task, right? And apparently because of that, globally, over 1 billion people having some kind of disabilities, they would potentially lose, I think the number was $465 million. And that is insane. And I mean, eventually, I think they did it, they implemented it. But to think that actually accommodating people with disabilities, and that is, I don't know, it still has some kind of a stigma. Uh, that's just the, I don't know,
No,
the vibe that
it's true. It does have
yeah,
that stigma. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow,
And
and my mind is blown. I was muting myself because I didn't want to interrupt and I wanted to hear the whole story. But yeah, I love that you're bringing in this integration with screen readers. It's such a simple thing. Like, and when I say simple, I know like tech debt and like my DevOps team and just people who code are probably like, oh no. But like, it's something that is very powerful, I guess, to be considering with your design and with your implementation and even with like prototyping before you build out. And even when you do build out, like thinking about like even as early as when you're developing your API, like, hey, how is the back end and the front end going to be accessible, and like I do think like there is such a huge number, like you said, this is 1 billion people. Like if just 1% of people with disabilities join the workforce that are currently unemployed, we would see like an increase in billions in the like global domestic product. So it's just like crazy that, we not crazy, but like it's just, so interesting that it's just been a neglected sector of society. I think
yeah,
there's a lot of focus on it now, even with neurodiversity and all these terms that were not around when I was growing up. I would have appreciated them. But like I do think there's more of a focus. And even when you look at big tech companies like Twitter or Google, Facebook, or now Meta, and like just large corporations are intentionally having somebody that is now doing DEAI. And again, remember diversity, equity, accessibility, inclusion. They're thinking about the accessible elements of their tech because they probably don't want to get caught up like Domino's did. And they want
yeah,
someone to be doing that research and design on that to get ahead of it. Because a big thing when we build and do design thinking, I've noticed the way I lead design sprints, I always think about inclusion on the front end. Like, what's it like for a trans user? What's it like for a queer user? Do we have images that support them? What's it like for a differently abled user? Can this be compatible with the screen reader or the colors right in our design system? But a lot of tech, they don't think about that right away just because there's not someone necessarily on the team pushing for that. And so, at the end, when everything's built out, now you're trying to add those layers and those elements, which you can do. But it just feels like, like you're saying, there can be some blind spots. And
yeah.
like in that scenario, and it can just be, to me, it seems like it might be more expensive because you see something's missing at the end, and then you have to go and shore up those elements. So
Right.
the biggest thing that makes me excited about Invisible Strengths is like we have developed some white papers we haven't put out yet, but just documenting the process of us building this, because I really want more people to be able to have that inclusive design lens. And I don't want it to be like they have to go to like a European conference. I love Europe, but like I want it to be everywhere, to where this is just normalized and just something that we think about. And not only just disability, because I like to say I'm in the middle of a Venn diagram, but I am a non-binary Black woman and I'm disabled. And like that's why we say like intersectional lens to disability justice, because like it's different if you're a woman and you're on the spectrum. It's different if you're a person with Crohn's disease and you're also Latinx, or you're also trans. Like you're more likely to be unemployed or underemployed because of your condition if you're in other marginalized groups. And a lot of times there's been more talk about this on the global scene, but even with women like masking or not being able to, like you were saying, like the stigma, not being able to come out and say these things because there's also already a pay gap and other things that you're dealing with. And so you don't want to further stigmatize yourself. So we're trying to fight those things. I'm realistic. I am a visionary, but I don't think that Invisible Strength is going to stop all of this. But I think like if we all join together, like I don't even see people as competitors, they're collaborators. It's like whether you're in inclusive design or not, this is something you can like think about, whether it's building your team or the actual tech itself. But yeah, the last thing I would add too is like people may have tuned out because they're like, well, I'm not in any of these communities, and that's fine. But I pitch to a lot of white males, as we all do, because that's big in the tech ecosystem. Yeah. And I just like to say things how they are. I don't really have a filter. I feel like I have a lot of great mentors that have been white males. You can't judge a book by its cover, but the reason I say this in all of my pitches is like, we're all going to get older. So like if things go according to plan, you're eventually going to enter the disabled community, because as we age, like our cognition, our mobility changes, and there's a lot of people working longer, especially as we're entering potentially a global recession. We hate to talk about it, but like people are going to be working longer. We don't know what like the support systems will look like as we age. And so like there's a lot of people, as you said, just feeling stigma. They're going to have diabetes, or just as they age, different health conditions come up. Eventually they'll need glasses, as their eyes get older. And so like inclusive, progressive employees are already thinking about how can we support people to work longer, right? Like how can we make sure we're giving them what they need to thrive so they can be day one ready, so that they can be like, just more engaged and all of those things.
Right. Oh no, this is amazing. I think I also read something about, like you said, why they're actually trying to accommodate older people in the workplace is because hiring a younger employee, a younger professional, would still cost more because the price of educating them is just too high. But anyway, you as a founder, tell us about this story. Like, what is the most inspiring? What is the most challenging to you as a founder? And I know you are non-tech, which is pretty impressive. You're building a tech company. All right. So what about it?
Wow, this is I love your questions. I don't get asked these things often, and they're so fun to answer. But like I go for like, I call it peaks and valleys. And like, so it's like, my peak, my mountaintop, my thing that I love. And my valley is like, just we're waiting on the next page to turn. But I would say I'll go back for a second and just say my why, because I didn't say that. But like, so I worked in public health and global health for the last decade. And like I worked in Latin America, Africa, Caribbean, and on just like health policy, health equity. And so this has always been a passion of mine. But I ended up actually having a vision disorder that I was diagnosed with 3.5 years ago, and I had to have a few emergency eye surgeries. And after those surgeries, my vision was not the same. And I needed to deal with accommodations on the job. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know so much about health equity, but I haven't focused on this disability topic as much. And I was, researching all these things on Reddit, on all the things we go to. And I was like, there's no centralized place for this information. And to be able to search for jobs for like all the identities I hold and find out if it's a culture fit. And so I wanted to create something that supported others. So I say that because my peak is like, or my mountaintop is like every time we get to help people. Like we just had DC Startup Week, which was just like a huge. DC's a growing. Washington DC in USA is a big global hub, starting to be for startup tech. And we actually had some Hungarian founders that came too, and some international founders as well. And it was just so amazing to just be able to connect with people. And honestly, it was a lot of founders that ended up being customer discovery for me, just because they were like, oh, I don't really talk about it a lot, but I have Crohn's disease, or I have cerebral palsy, or I have just anxiety. Like a lot of people have these invisible conditions and they just don't feel comfortable sharing about it, or they just don't think about how it's a part of their identity. So then they were like, I would use this to hire for my team. And not only was it a great, I love doing customer discovery in person, because it really just adds a whole other element of being able to hear from someone. And I always hear, like, when you hear the same thing, that's when you talk to enough people. And I started to hear the same thing, and there was an appetite for it before I really even talked about the platform as much. So that made me excited and just gave like purpose to, okay, I'm not building this in like a petri dish. Like, people want this. It's always important to have that product market fit, and also just like that customer product fit as well, because sometimes your customer markets can change what they want. And we have pivoted to address that. So that's definitely was my mountain for this month. And just like still this week, I'm still riding that high from DC Startup Week, connecting with people, just like that are building similar or different things. I love like building the ecosystem, building my network. And so the Valley definitely would be tech. It's no surprise. Like non-technical found, like, so I'll just say this, like, as being a CEO, obviously, like my main focus is, sometimes getting funding and things like that. Sometimes, right?
Right.
But like
From
I
time
also,
to time.
right. I also have to wear like so many different hats, especially until like we have more runway to build out more of our team, and have less contractors or consultants or apprentices and more full-time. So in the interim, I'm like doing a lot of triangulation between like the UX UI team, the actual engineering team, and what I'm going out and selling. So like marketing, or working with my co-founder, COO, which God bless her, she works with me every day. I don't know how she does it, but like she's a dear friend that like it just works. But the point is, like, sometimes it's like you promise a feature as a marketing team to close a deal or a letter of intent, right? But then like, how is that affecting your engineers? Like, how many points or time is going to take them to build out that new button or whatever that might be? And then like for the UX, UI folks, like the actual research they're doing for you, are they touching base with like that DevOps or that engineering team to make sure we're all on the same page about like, yes, we have our stretch goals, but like what's actually feasible in our MVP or feasible in whatever you're doing, even if it's a new feature rollout. And so like, some people call it tech debt, other things, but like you don't want to burn out your team by like continuing to overpromise things. And then on the back end, they're having to do all this late work. I really value, if we're doing something about culture fit. So I think about the culture of our organization too, and like living out our values and hearing from different people. And I've noticed even with the engineering team, they may not want to talk as much. Some people are on the spectrum that have worked on our engineering team, which that doesn't mean they don't want to talk as much, but they may want things written out or have different communication styles than like the UX UI or me. I love to talk to people. That's what I do for a living. But getting on the same page with everyone, that was like, I call it a valley just because things always take longer than you think. And so we've been working on our MVP. We have several prototypes, and just with figuring out that we needed to develop our API, that we want the front end, the back end to talk, and also like people being able to explain it to me, because I know a lot of these terms, but I've had to do my own training and like read a lot on this, ask people to explain things to me in a non-technical way. And I think you do have to be like, as a good leader, you have to be okay with like, you're not supposed to be the smartest person in the room at all, especially on certain topics. So there's a lot of people who I'm leading that they know how to code in all these languages I'm never going to learn. And I did do some no code trainings with like Bubble, and I wanted to learn some of that, but like my best use of time is not coding it,
Right.
So I do have to like be able to understand, and sometimes like meet in the middle and do compromises when we do have like stand-up meetings about like product roadmap or stuff like that. Like, so that sometimes disappoints me because I'm like, I have this grandiose vision in my head, but also like nailing down what are the points for every element of this. And like, it won't always be like that, but I think that that's sometimes can be a valley. Something's taking a little bit longer than I wanted to, but I also am like appreciative of us being intentional and maybe having a slower pacing, but again, making sure the inclusive design, making sure stuff is certified to be able to work on the screen reader and stuff like that is important to us on the front end. So we are taking more time to sometimes build things out or get the wireframes ready or, get different things together. So
Right.
that would probably be my valley. But don't get after me, my team. I love you guys, but like it takes adjustment.
Right. And is your team there in the room with you, or is it all remote?
We're decentralized. We're given DAO. We're not actually in the DAO, but like we very much are just, we always want to be remote.
Okay.
That's something, again, just an accommodation first approach that I have. Like, people can be effective wherever they are. We actually had one of our UX UI designers was living in Italy, and we're here based in the US, but it's okay as long as we get it together. One of our virtual assistants, she's in Pakistan. Like, it's very, very decentralized as long as we can have sometimes to collaborate, which is why I was excited to partner with you guys, just because one, I want us to be in a global market, but like my whole career has been global. And I think we can all like learn from each other. And there are different trends in different countries, ecosystems, but I do see more globalization happening as far as startup. And I love looking at what's happening in like EU or everywhere just to see what the trends are. Yeah.
Right. No, that's amazing. I think you should never stop learning, like whatever job you're doing, right? Or at least never stop exploring. But I really loved how you said, I don't look at my competitors as competitors, rather as collaborators. So what are the companies, and I know you mentioned some big ones, what are the companies maybe you are looking up to, maybe that are doing a good job, maybe are the inspiration for you? So what's out there that's already working on accessible tech?
Yeah. I would say I would say two things that I'm thinking of. I'll say who's in our vertical as well, but like, cause that's just, I think great if you really do your total addressable market size, there's enough
Yeah.
market, like for what you're doing, there's enough, market for everyone. We may not be the
Right.
best fit for everyone, and I still want them to get the help they want. We're specifically focused on intersectionality. So if you have multiple identities, but if maybe that's not you, you could go to another person in our vertical, which I would say would be chronically capable. They're in the global market. I found out about them once I was already like a year and a half in, but I've heard really good things. I would also say uh, inclusivity. Yeah,
Okay.
it's based in the US. I think I'm not sure if they're expanding to global, but they also are like allowing people to search for jobs with accommodations. So I really love that, more people are moving towards this, and that from what I've been seeing as far as them raising, being able to get to the Series A, and I think going now to Series B with both chronically capable and inclusivity, it's just market validation to me that
Right.
this is something that people need. And it also, like, I want to see you go further, because that means I'm going to go further as well. As far as things outside of tech as well, that are up and coming, I recently did a think tank with some folks from Department of Labor in the US. And there were some other folks who were like disabled veterans making tools for other disabled veterans to find jobs. I don't remember all the names, but like I will try to send you some more stuff after the call. But like basically just hearing about other things, and like I mentioned, XR access for the US, the Department of Labor also. Anyone can look. I think they also look to other countries as well, but they have reports that will come out where they're trying to actually develop more tech apprenticeships specifically for like Black Americans to be able to get into the industry, because some of these tech jobs, as we know, you don't have to have a degree from a 4-year school or even associates, I love learning, like you said. So I'm like on the way to doctorate, but you don't have to do that at all. Like I'm doing that because I love learning, not because I needed that to get in tech. A lot of times you just need a certification, so there is a big push as far as grant programs. And I do sometimes look to grants to see like where the trends are going, at least across the world, honestly. But I just mainly more focus US because that's the ones we're eligible for because we're registered here right now. Like there's a lot of grants for like inclusive apprenticeships or like tech programs being built out for inclusive future of work. So that makes me excited to see what else comes out of that. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else as far as tech. Yeah, I'm just looking at a lot of reports to just try and see where things are coming from. But there's more and more happening. A really cool thing at DC Startup Week that I saw that blew my mind, and I feel so bad that I don't remember this woman's name, a dope Black woman who does like trainings on CPR certification and AED certification, which I know we're all familiar with. My first job ever was being a lifeguard. So I am CPR and AED certified, but like she found a way to do a VR headset where you can actually do this training. And so she's partnering with, different lifeguard schools, different hospital systems, where like you can actually practice doing these, different compressions and stuff, and doing all of this in the virtual reality. And that was just so cool to me, because to me, that's accessibility. You don't know who's around you that may need that training. And also, as somebody who did it the old school way with people, you can't fully go out do the full blown compressions and stuff. You can have like, dummy dolls type of thing, but like it's not the exact same. So being able to really see what that whole scenario looks like is amazing, the possibilities for it. So I think a lot of new stuff is coming out, and I'm just kind of like trying to stay tuned as well. Cause again, it's all just enriching the ecosystem. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I'm thinking of, but I know there's like a lot more push as well in like Hollywood anyway for more depictions of people with disabilities or trans people or whatever their identity is, it to be like authentic to them. So, there's a lot of people trying to source like, okay, we want an actor, actress with, no leg, and actually finding actors and actresses out there with no leg, rather than, like you said, trying to pay a lot to every single day use costume and design to make a person who is able-bodied look like that. So there are a lot of different, and I'm not going to remember the names right now, but there are a lot of different, if you even just Google, like sourcing platforms for like even like actors and actresses and everything in between, like to be able to find people who authentically can play those roles, is authentically a trans person or whatever their identity might be. And I think that it's really cool to see too, because some of them are using tech platforms in that it's kind of like an Airtable type of build, or Webflow type of build, where you can upload all of your photos and your skills and everything, on there, and then they source you to, Netflix or whoever is kind of looking for these folks. So that's
Right.
also kind of cool, that's happening as well.
So there is a lot more about awareness, right?
Yeah.
A little bit less on the implementation. I'm going to send you another really really um, cool project because I knew the founder. It's called Smart Course, and it's online courses catered to learning disabilities, especially
Oh,
ADHD.
wow. That's cool.
So
Yeah.
really, really cool project, really picking it up. But another question would be, and I think this is pretty important, what are the common challenges for accessible collaborative solutions? So
Yeah.
like, how can we overcome them? Like, because like you said, there are laws, there are regulations, so people are aware about that on like government level. So
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
cannot we have more of them implemented?
Yeah, I think two things came to mind for me. So one, used to work for the government, no shade. Used to work for do stuff with like international government too. I did Peace Corps back in the day, but like I would say a lot of things in government may not be the place. It's not always historically been the place for innovation. Sometimes and this is all governments, whether it's Ministry of Health in other countries, they're used to doing their process the way they're doing it. And so there is often some person in place at a lot of government offices internationally that will source diverse talent, whether that means disability, trans, whatever that can mean for diverse talent for that country. But the issue is we know as tech people, it can be more efficient with automation. So here in the US, we have something called Schedule A hiring, which actually went into effect it was already a policy before the first Obama administration in 2008, but it became more utilized at that time. And basically, it's just trying to we realized how many people were disabled in our whole population in the US. And we were like, why are those people not working for government? So there is like a expedited process where you can like upload a letter that you have from your doctor that says you have a disability. You don't have to say which one, it's just a medical code. And it will like put your resume at the top of the pile type of thing. You also still have to have your skills, obviously, with it. But it also helped a lot of people who were disabled veterans, because the problem internationally, with people being disabled veterans and not being able to find a job afterwards, right? So it was helping a lot of that community, as well as just any people with disabilities. And it was anything protected under our laws, which is actually a pretty expansive list if you look into it. It's HIV, it includes dyslexia, it includes, ADHD, autism, alcoholism, a lot of things that people don't realize. And even in the US, when you are pregnant, you have a short-term disability, because technically
Oh,
during that
wow.
time, you can deal with, postpartum depression, you can deal with preeclampsia, all of these different things that come with being pregnant. And really, your roles and responsibilities may need to be reconsidered during that time. Not for everyone, but like you can't work the same hours and things like that when you're on like your final trimester. A lot of this we just don't think as accommodation. But I say all that because that's happening. And even in workplaces, whether it's corporate, nonprofit, we've talked to them all, that it's a lot of archaic things. And I think right now we're dealing with a revolution in employment. That's why we're seeing the great resignation. That's why people are demanding more. And employers are shifting their culture and their strategic plan around this stuff. And they're trying to be better. They're trying to learn and just address their blind spots. So I think that like people are, if there is an automated system, they want to be able to use it, but there just hasn't been something broadly used. So we're trying to be that. We're trying to get there and just change the way we're sourcing jobs and retaining people. But it takes time. Culture shifts don't happen overnight. And I know in tech, we're really big on innovation tomorrow. And so like I'm balancing that with also like, okay, but when you're intentional and you're building something sustainable, where it's like you're not going to have to completely destroy a back end and rebuild it. you really take a little bit more time. And so I think that that's one thing that's coming up. And I'm sorry if I lost the question a little bit, but
No, that's okay.
it's just taking time. And so like that's been a big piece of like the automation, they are funding stuff like this through the government, through other sources. I see a lot of HR tech coming out across the ecosystem, and I mean internationally, but it just takes time to be able to build, and get that to really we're SaaS B2B, but get it to where it's really just generating revenue and it's just sustainable and you're able to even scale and test some new things. What I would say is also, something we had to accept, because I remember you said like not a shortcoming, but something that's frustrating or a challenge. We're not going to be able to build this for every single person. And like, so that's okay. Like there are new conditions coming out because of climate change. There's going to be new variations of COVID-19, and there's always going to be new diseases. And I say that because that's like a massive disabling event, right? Like a lot of people still have complications from COVID, whether it be anxiety, depression, or actually lung complications. So like we can't always be for everyone, but what we've added in our own algorithm or just our user flow is like, you can also tell us what we're missing. So these are the accommodations that we have listed here now. Hey, is there accommodation you don't see? And that's for the side of the employer or for the job seeker, because through our user testing on both sides, we have heard like, hey, this is missing, or this should be in this drop down menu and this one, because I'm looking for at the vision icon and I don't see, exactly what I'm looking for. And so we're going off of when we see a lot of errors occur, and then we change the button or change whatever the flow is. And then when we see the errors lessen, that's when we know, oh, this is a solution to that issue. But I think anybody who's making tech and saying they're not dealing with issues is just not being forthright. It's a part of it. It's a part of it. It's like, again, we talked about constantly being committed to learning. If you're in tech, you have to be constantly committed. There's going to be something new next week that we don't even know about. And like, it's okay. We're not everything for everyone, or you're nothing to nobody, but we are, trying to still at the same time, get better. So it is like, we do have open, we try to embed surveying to kind of hear, especially from like femme identified women, hey, we're forcing every job that comes with us to put the salary range. We're trying to address the pay gap because people brought to us, hey, how is this solution affecting the pay gap? So with things where we can make adjustments, we do. Sometimes it's not feasible, that's just the reality. But like, definitely always staying open. And I would challenge other apps too, to small changes, even whether you're a dating app, whatever you are, like having an option for people to select multiple categories. There could be a person who's mixed with 5 races. They just want to be able to select all their races, and that's okay. Like, that's not going to stop our flow. We can still collect that data and just allow for people to be able to select multiple or one. Like, there's just little changes you can make when people tell you certain things, even from gender. Maybe they want to select multiples. That's not going to stop us from being able to do what we're trying to do with our platform, which is connect job seekers to, job posters at the end of the day. That's our thing that we're trying to do, and we're building a user experience around that, depending on what people's appetite is.
Right. And do you think that, ensuring accessibility from the very early stage would end up saving the time and the money for businesses?
I think so. Now I'm still in it. Get back to me in like a year. But no, I'm really a big jokester. I think so. I think like, when you think about designing a culture, like I still sometimes would do consulting while I'm bootstrapping this project. But like, basically, when you're trying to come in and clean something up, it's always going to be more laborious than like if you intentionally develop systems that can be built upon. So what I mean by that is like, I'll come in and people will want me to do like a DEAI audit, and then we want to make changes in the organization. These type of overhauls and changes to really retain and change culture. Don't stop paying me my consulting fee, guys, but like, it's not one training. It's just not. It's an ongoing process of like educating folks that don't understand quite yet, retraining managers on these elements, rebuilding how you embrace people of different identities, and then building that trust. And this takes years. A strategic plan takes years to really execute. And so like the fact that our strategic plan is already committed to this and we're already embodying these values, we're partnering with historically black colleges and universities or HBCUs in the US. I know they can be like minority serving institutions, other countries, but like basically we've partnered with their engineering programs and like let people come on as like, interns and apprentices over the summer. We partnered with some folks like Center for Disease Control to have a fellow with us. Like we want to give back. And I think like, yes, it can take longer. Like you said, it does take a little bit longer to train people, but people are really that align with our culture and our values, whether that be investors, whether that be like early adopters, they appreciate that. And that's bringing the right folks to us, like through the law of attraction, like people who really appreciate the way that we're building intentionally, they're coming to us. And I think that in the long term, we know why we put each button where we put it. And it's just like, I would rather do this ideating and doing this user testing and doing this just beta testing almost with different folks, finding out what the errors are along the way. Like I'm a researcher, anthropologist. So like, I just like seeing human behavior and how they interact with this technology before I know so many people and I've seen so many horror stories where you build something nobody wants. Or like, something's changed by the time you get it built. And that's okay. Like it's no shade, things happen. Like a lot of people are on their third product and that's why they're doing so well. I'm a serial entrepreneur too. It's fine. I want to build other things, but I do think it's important like to do those checks, the pulse checks throughout, rather than at the end, you're like, oh, is this still resonating? And you've already put all this time, money, effort, like without really getting to constantly check. Like, I feel like we do it every month, honestly. And even just, unscheduled ones between them. You can't always do it all the time to the same degree. As far as the amount of people, like obviously we've had bigger batches of surveying and testing, but I do think for me, I'm loving the process. And even when it comes to building more products, I feel like if you save that data, that can show you like, hey, this is another pain point, that I want to build something else for eventually, or go back to it and kind of see what else were they saying. Because I really, through these conversations, some are the test with the product, some are without, and they're just like, hey, how are you currently doing this? Because I want to know what their current process is. So like when we do the sell back into them, we already know, hey, this is what they're currently using. Here's how we're going to like address during our pitch into them, how they're not getting, and what our value prop really is to this person. And that's been a way for us to source also a lot of our early adopters, a lot of our letters of intent from businesses, and being in a lot of groups for differently able job seekers. I won't share all of them because some of them are private, and it's just, for people to be able to talk about the experience. But they are building trust with us. They've seen us through time growing, and they are committed to, like, they've pre-subscribed, they verbally, but also in writing, committed to being on the platform. And so I think it is like allowing us to kind of build a community around this. And then like, obviously we're going to go to monetization. But yeah, I think everybody's thing is different. It just depends. Like I have other friends who are building something mechanical,
Right.
So it's like, that's going to be a little different. Like you're going to have to build out that product first, and you can still get some testing and some interviewing, but at a certain point you need to just build that thing. But I think like with tech, especially with the no code tools and stuff, take advantage. I'm very much a recovering perfectionist, so I wanted it to just be all together, but like getting it into people's hands is the most valuable thing we could have done. And like the earlier you can do that, the better. I didn't understand when a lot of mentors, I've done a lot of accelerators and incubators. So I do want to uplift that just because they've helped me along my journey. But like, I got mentors through that, and other people who have exited multiple companies just telling me, get it into people's hands, test your financial model, see if what people are willing to pay, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And you're going to get it there, but you just don't need to wait to get it to people until it's like this perfect thing,
Right.
Sometimes, perfect can be the enemy of good. I've always heard that when I was working internationally, and like, I would get annoyed because I was like, I want it to be perfect, but like,
I
it's
want
true.
perfect.
It's true. It's so true.
But yeah, I think it's a great advice. I mean, to any founder out there, because in a lot of cases, you kind of want to not just show the idea. You want you want them to feel it. You want them to touch it. You want them to actually explore, the user experience and stuff like that. But that was amazing. I think what you just said just sums up the entire experience as a founder. So would you because I would absolutely love to hear more, but we unfortunately have to stop eventually. But yeah, I would absolutely love to know who you think we should ask to come here next, and maybe tell more about accessible tech, or maybe, I don't know, maybe if it's your mentor, to tell about startups, about life of a founder, and so on.
I was on mute the whole time.
Yeah.
So I would tell you one specific person two specific people that are my mentors. And then I will also just tell you about 3 programs where like they source a lot of other people, and I want to give back to them because they help me. So the one person, Norma Patron, she actually is a first generation American in Latinx, and she has been an economist and a venture capitalist before, and now she is actually working at a startup. We're connected through LinkedIn if you need to find her there. But she's building a learning platform. And actually it's already built, like she runs the learning platform there. And so I think she'd be a good person to talk to. And we talk a lot about healthcare workforce. She has also had a really crazier career than me, like amazing mentor, and always giving back, and so much information on the side of the VC and the founder, because she's also gone out and raised on the other side of the table too. And then the other person I would say is Jackie Patterson. And it's Jaqui and Patterson. And I can always send you a message with this. She's another one of my mentors. And what I love about her is she has always been in social impact and environmental justice. And she is actually an internationally known environmentalist. So she's very, very well respected. Thankfully, she let me be her intern when I was like 15, 16. And she's been like mentoring me throughout my years. And even we both are now in tech, but we started out in environmental space. And I still am on the board for her organization, which is called Chisholm Legacy Project. It's after Shirley Chisholm, who is a famous African-American woman in the US that, I'm not sure if you've heard of her, but she was on the Congress, and she also ran for president at one time. She was the first Black woman to run for president.
Okay.
And this was a while ago. She didn't go as far, but that's still amazing. And she actually started like the Committee on Environmental Justice in like that Congress in the US, and it's still running. But anyway, what they do is they're creating a database using GIS software. And I can't remember what the acronym for that stands for, but it's basically geo positioning software, where like you're mapping. It's like digital mapping. Okay. Correct me, whoever knows what GIS stands for. I should know, because my master's is in public health, and a lot of people do GIS in public health. But for me, that wasn't my certification. But anyway, you develop mapping systems, and you're able to basically, how certain like GIS software is used in stuff like Lyft or Uber, where you can like find where you're located, but also you can just like store data. So what they're trying to do is store like where climate disparities are happening in the US and abroad, just for specifically Black people. And like they're looking at how people can come together, and like even if it's lawsuits against big energy or things like that, they can find out, oh, all of these people in my region are all dealing with this oil spill, or all dealing with these emissions from these dumps, and we can all come together and like help each other politically. They also have databases to share, like lawyers, contacts, policy people, just different things to help people fight for climate
Very
justice.
interesting.
Yeah, so it's called Chisholm Legacy Project. They are I believe, 501(c), so I think they're a nonprofit, but they have a for-profit arm as well, where they do consulting and where they are building out more of the tech elements. So I am excited for hopefully you to talk to either one of those two. And then the three groups I would share is Halcyon. I'm currently a fellow with them. HALYCON. It's on my link. All of this is on my LinkedIn, but they are an international fellowship program based out of Georgetown, and that's in Washington, D.C., USA. For those who are listening, wherever you are, whenever you see this, they do different cohorts. They have an application open now, but they also have an alumni network. So that could be a good place for you to start. It's all social impact businesses, but they're different. Like, it could be marketing to physical products, to like tech enabled businesses. All of them are startups, but that could be a good place to also check out. Secondly, DivInc. They are focused on diversity in the startup ecosystem. DIVINC. They were the ones who shared this, so I want to share their stuff too. They are based in Austin, Texas. I think they have had some international folks as well. If you're familiar with South by Southwest and stuff like that, they do a lot with that ecosystem in Austin. And yeah, they have an alumni network too. So again, like just you can find a bunch of people. I met Norma, the one I first spoke about. She was my mentor through that program. So they also have a lot of mentors, and they work with Techstars as well. And I know nobody has trouble finding this, but I did the Techstars pre-catalyst program as well. And like it's for women LGBT founders. And I'm about to actually do a roundtable with them they're going to be doing it in the Bay Area of California next. But they picked 20 businesses in different regions that are led by LGBT or women founders, and or both. You get all of it. And they just hope it's kind of like a funnel into the bigger Techstars program. Right. But it's just they focus on having mainly just women come talk to you that have raised that, just to talk about that nuanced experience. And so I do think all of those would be good. And again, they have alumni. You'll see us on the site, all these groups, but also you'll see other groups that you may be interested in. So just kind of look through those. But yeah.
I definitely have a lot of research to do. I mean, you just threw like a lot of history here and so many names, and I absolutely will do my homework. So sorry I wasn't better prepared. But
you shared some with me too, with the dominoes, and don't forget the other group. We're all learning together.
Yeah, I can even send you the TED Talk that I watched about it. So that was like the intro to it. Super cool. But yeah, I mean, with the technology now, central to pretty much everything we do, it's absolutely important to make sure that it's accessible for everybody. So thank you for doing it, and thank you for being a part of this world. I would absolutely love to talk to you more. And so thank you, Mariah. And for the next episode, we're also going to welcome an amazing woman founder, Charlie Rosier, and she's going to talk about the leadership behind one of the UK's top 50 impact companies, which is going to be super exciting. So yeah, come there, come listen, and see you soon.